in 1886, and that was when they became more recognized. How common are they? Only 10.7% of workers are unionized now, when it was 20.1% in 1983, so that's on the decline, and same thing with private sector unions. They're only 7% unionized. The contract is the main governing body of all unions, and it's renegotiated every contract year, which is, it depends for unions. For like construction, it's every like 4 or 5 years, and that really just goes over everything that's a part of the unions. What it covers your wages, how much you're allowed to be paid, the work week, which is usually 40 hours, and your overtime, how much you're going to be paid if you go over, insurance and all your health benefits, all your retirement and all that. Who works for the unions? Each firm under the union is going to have their own individual workers who are going to be working under that union contract, and they work mainly for the one company, but for example, the hall has other guys that they can get. So the union hall has its own workers that they have ready for anyone who needs them, basically. You have, if a company needs more workers, they can just call the union, and those workers will go there and they'll get paid whatever that union's salary is. HR, it does the hiring only for the workers in that individual company, but they also kind of have control over who's going to be coming from the hall and who they're going to be bringing in. My personal experience with the hall is I work at a glass contractor out in Pennsylvania, and whenever we're either shorthanded or we're just so stacked full of work that we need more guys, we just go to the hall and they come in to us and they'll do whatever we need them to do, really. The hall and HR, it makes HR's job easier. It's going to make it so that there's really no vacant positions. You're never really going to be shorthanded in the case that, say you have somebody who just up and quits instead of putting in like a 2-week notice. You have guys that you can just call in and be ready. All Glass Systems LLC is the glass contractor where I work at, out in Pendle, PA. We do work in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, and we're part of the Glazers Union. It's IUPAT. Benefits of being a union: you're going to get state benefits where non-unionized firms will not. You get health and dental for your family. You have a pension, retirement funds, 401k, all that you're going to be able to save up for the future. Different types of unions. We have construction unions, such as the Glazers Union, which I'm a part of. We have metal workers, carpenters, and there's teaching unions, which are usually public schools, and then there's medical unions, such as the doctors, pharmaceutical. You have high expectations of unions because they're higher costs, but you have higher quality of the work. You have skilled labor, and this picture here says skilled labor isn't cheap, and cheap labor isn't skilled. Now, OSHA is what governs a majority of construction unions. It's mostly safety laws. Honestly, it's a pain in the ass. They get you for literally everything. So, my personal experience with OSHA is we've had guys neglect to wear hard hats more than once. You need to appeal. It takes weeks for the things to go through. There's usually always a fine, so we had to deal with all that stuff plenty of times. Cost of labor it's pretty extensive. You have skilled workers and high quality material, so your labor costs are going to be much higher than what they would be in non-unionized firms because they're not always as skilled, and like the previous picture said, cheap labor isn't skilled labor. Teaching unions, they're usually public schools where teachers are unionized because private schools are just they're hired just for that. Teaching unions let teachers go all over the place, and then you see strikes are usually public in teaching unions because ups and downs of this are going to be increased benefits and skilled labor. And then the downs of it are going to be you have to pay union dues, which aren't that high, and then you're going to have higher costs. And now we're going to hand it over to Morgan.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Morgan, and my part of the presentation is going to discuss the history of unions and their role in society today. Basically, why unions are so important is because their history is the reason why we have the laws and regulations that we have today. So, labor unions originally started with the birth of the United States, but they weren't that active until the 18th century. The reason why they formed was because of low wages, working conditions, and safety issues. The downfall to them is that they're often associated with crippling industries and consorting with organized crime. So during the 1860s, the building of the railroad industry was happening, so this also increased unionization. The Brotherhood of Locomotives Engineers was designed basically as a way to protect workers from safety issues and low wages. So in 1866, an alliance of unions formed in order to protect workers' rights. The first one was the National Labor Union, and their goal was to limit the workday to 8 hours. The second one was the American Federation of Labor, and their goal was job security and higher wages. So wartime had a huge impact on the increase and decrease of union membership. From the Civil War to World War I, factory workers increased, which also which also increased labor union workers. During the Great Depression, FDR implemented his New Deal policy, which increased wages. He did this so that the Great Depression would hopefully help it. And then during World War II, it prevented strikes. So unions have been decreasing in power over the past few decades. This is because of corruption in unions and the passing of new laws. Because of these laws, union workers don't feel the need to be protected by federal laws anymore. So unions are more important today than they ever were in the past. They're the voice of workers, and they also have more power together than they do alone. They also make sure workers are treated fairly and protect their laws. So companies have many advantages when it comes to unions. Their goals are always long-term profitability, keeping a supply of labor, and minimizing turnover. So when a union worker has a voice in the company, it keeps them happy, so they stay with the company. It also increases productivity because they're able to demonstrate their knowledge and skills. Union workers typically have better benefits than non-union workers. They get higher wages, they have the option for additional job training, which increases those wages. They have benefits for friends and family, and oftentimes they also have health care. So unions actually affect everyone in society. They're the reasons why we have things like weekends, paid vacations, and even lunch breaks. They also influence the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits employer discrimination. We have unemployment and pensions, which you're getting paid even when you're not working, and everyone has higher wages because of organized labor. So the unionization process happens where either a union worker, a regular worker, or an employer requests one. The second step in it is an organizational meeting. Then signatures are required, and then a secret ballot election is held. If it's voted yes, then they go through with their agreement. So things that employers want to avoid during the unionization process is basically threatening employees with punishment or termination. They also want to avoid taking away employee benefits or telling them they're going to shut down the business. So unions influence HR in many ways. Usually human resource managers are responsible for anything dealing with employees. When unions are involved with HR, they actually prevent managers from making decisions on their own and limit their freedom. So collective bargaining is basically an agreement between the labor union and the employer. Basically, this states that managers follow this instead of making their own decisions when it comes to employees. It negotiates the contracts of employees and actually helps with problem solving in the workplace. So advantages of collective bargaining include pro-employees, so it helps them fight for their rights. It prevents strikes since it's an agreement, and it also provides them with security and stability since it gives them a tenure so they don't need to worry about being fired. Disadvantages of collective bargaining is that it increases the gap between employees. It also takes a while to establish, anywhere from a few months to a few years. It also is prone to inequality, where one side gets more than what they deserve. So the collective bargaining process happens in 4 ways. The first is preparation, where objectives and negotiations are met. The second is discussion, where they talk about what they want to propose to the union. The third is the actual proposals, where they present it to each other. And then the fourth is bargaining, where they set an agreement in the contract. So current union challenges are globalization and non-union status. Unions have been decreasing since the 1950s. They've went from 36% to 11%. Globalization makes it so that employers are going other places to produce their goods for cheaper. Steps that employers will take to ununionize their business will be they'll supply their employees with proper rights, such as like fair pay and safe workplaces, and they'll also present arguments such as union dues are costly. And up next is Victoria.
Hi everyone, I'm going to be discussing in this portion of the presentation just a little bit of information about how unions affect American culture as well as some other things. So in the workplace, especially corporate America, we expect certain things that were up there on the board. Collective bargaining is a negotiation of wages or other things that employees might want by a group of organized people such as the union members. Some positive things that unions have done to use collective bargaining is things like nurses have gotten better patient care and teachers have gotten smaller group sizes. Unions are also pretty well known for their political support. They have a really big impact on different laws that have been passed as well as officials that have been elected. Unions also make a pretty big difference in the community that they're around. So, for example, sometimes firefighters will raise money for cancer research. Mail carriers who are in unions will let officials know when someone isn't been collecting their mail for a few days, and they'll also clean up a lot of times after natural disasters. So how do unions affect human resource management? Well, the goal of HR is to not only help the employees, but also to make the place of work more efficient. And the goal of unions is to get what employees want. So sometimes that comes into conflict. So in the next couple slides, I'm going to be discussing how an organization is affected when there isn't a union in place and just how HR runs from that standpoint. So when an HR manager doesn't have to deal with unions in the company, it's a lot easier for their policies that they have researched with industry standards and with different laws that are in effect to put what they actually want in the workplace. And it makes it easier for employees to also work with grievances. So if an employee has any sort of issues in the workplace, they can go to the HR manager directly and they can negotiate that for their own selves if they want a promotion, a raise, or if they want to be transferred, things like that. When there are unions in the workplace, HR tends to have a couple of different issues that arrive. Sometimes they can't work the way that they may have been trained in the past, or they might just have to work on different things to make sure that what they are doing follows all the standards. So when a union is in the place of an organization, the HR manager must work through the union to determine different policies and to work with any complaints that, like I said, that employees might have. And a lot of times when you are presenting, the employees might have grievances that need to have a union representative there as well. Another big issue is payroll. So sometimes an employee might want their union dues directly taken out of their paycheck to go for union dues, and not all of them want that. The process itself isn't complicated, but sometimes it's a nuisance for HR. So the next thing I'm going to be discussing is how unions have been in the news lately, just a couple of different articles that I researched. And the first one is going to be about a football team from Northwestern University. So Northwestern University their football players wanted to unionize, and at first it seemed like they were going to be able to, but eventually the National Labor Relations Board dismissed their